You don't realize it at first. You just feel tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. You feel emotionally full, yet strangely empty. You replay conversations in your head, wondering if you said too much, cared too hard, loved openly, and somewhere deep inside, there's a quiet fear that maybe the problem isn't them. Maybe it's you. If you've ever felt that way, this conversation is for you. People who care too much rarely look broken on the outside. They're the ones who check in first, who notice the mood shift in a room, who remember details others forget. They are emotional translators in a world that often refuses to speak honestly. But what no one tells you is this: caring too much in just kindness. It's a psychological pattern, and behind it, there's a story your nervous system learned a long time ago. You weren't born caring too much. At some point, your brain learned that love equals attention, safety equals emotional awareness, and survival means staying one step ahead of other people's feelings. Neuroscience tells us that the brain wires itself around what keeps us safe. If, early on, you learned that being attuned, helpful, emotionally available, or easy to love reduced conflict or earned approval, your brain rewarded that behavior with dopamine and relief. Caring became protection. Empathy became armor. So now, as an adult, you feel responsible for emotional balance everywhere you go. You sense tension before words are spoken. You adjust yourself automatically. You give more than you're asked for, not because you're weak, but because your nervous system associates harmony with safety. This is not a flaw, it's an adaptation. But adaptations can outlive the environments they were built for. Here's the hidden truth most people miss. People who care too much are not desperate for love. They are deeply skilled at emotional labor. They just learn to give it outward before learning how to give it inward. Psychology calls this hyper-responsibility for others' emotions. It feels noble. It looks generous. But internally, it can slowly drain your sense of self. You start measuring your worth by how needed you are. You confuse being valued with being useful. You stay longer in situations that hurt because leaving feels like abandoning someone emotionally. And when someone pulls away, your mind doesn't ask, "Are they right for me?" It asks, "What did I do wrong?" That's not insecurity. That's conditioning. There's also a quiet, uncomfortable side to caring too much that no one likes to talk about. Sometimes, it becomes a subtle form of control, not because you want power, but because uncertainty feels unsafe. When you manage emotions, anticipate needs, and fix problems before they surface, you reduce unpredictability. Your brain relaxes, but relationships need space to breathe. And when you carry too much emotional weight, others never learn to carry their own. This is where the pain deepens, because the same trait that makes you loving can attract people who don't want to do the work. Some will lean back while you lean forward. Some will mistake your emotional availability for unlimited access. And when you finally need support, the silence can feel shocking, not because they're cruel, but because the relationship was unconsciously built on imbalance. Yet, it's important to say this clearly: caring deeply is not the problem. The world is starved of emotionally intelligent people. Your ability to feel, to sense, to connect is rare. The issue is not your depth, it's direction. Caring without boundaries turns empathy into self-erasure. Caring with self-respect turns it into strength. Behavioral science shows that people who overcare often struggle with something called emotional self-abandonment. You stay present for everyone else, but you leave yourself the moment conflict arises. You silence your needs to preserve connection. Over time, your body remembers. That's why anxiety shows up as tightness in the chest. That's why resentment appears out of nowhere. That's why exhaustion feels personal. But here's the healing shift most people never experience. You don't have to care less. You have to care differently. You have to include yourself in the circle of empathy you so freely give others. The same awareness you use to read a room can be turned inward. The same compassion you offer freely can be practiced privately. This is not selfishness. This is regulation. When you begin to pause before overgiving, something interesting happens in your brain. The nervous system learns a new association. Safety does not require overextension. Love does not require self-sacrifice. And slowly, your relationships change. Not because you become colder, but because you become clearer. Some people will resist this version of you. They were comfortable with the old dynamic. Let them go gently. Others will meet you at your depth. Not because you rescued them, but because you finally stood still long enough to be seen. That's when connection becomes mutual instead of performative. There's a quiet grief in this process. You may mourn the version of yourself who tried so hard, who believed love had to be earned through effort. Sit with that grief. Honor it. That version of you kept you alive emotionally when you didn't know another way. But you don't live there anymore. So if you're someone who cares too much, hear this softly. You are not too sensitive, too intense, or too emotional. You are perceptive in a world that rewards numbness. The work now is not to shrink your heart, but to protect it, to stop pouring into people who never learned to pour back, to trust that you are worthy even when you are not fixing, saving, or holding everything together. And maybe tonight, as you sit with your thoughts, ask yourself this not with judgment, but with curiosity. What would change if you gave yourself the same care you've been giving everyone else all along?